The Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition Public Policy Workgroup presents Advocacy and Policy Change. Thank you for joining us for another in our advocacy series. I'm Tom McCoy, Executive Director, State Government Affairs for the Nevada Chronic Care Collaborative and co-chair of the NMHEC Public Policy Workgroup. Joining me is Gabby Everett of Three Square, Nevada. Now, Gabby, Three Square suggests food, meals. What's the mission of Three Square?
Absolutely. Well, hello, and it's great to be joining everybody. Three Square's mission is pretty simple. In the more immediate, we seek to provide wholesome food to hungry people, while always passionately pursuing that possibility of a hunger-free community.
So, are we talking about Las Vegas, Clark County, Southern Nevada? What's your area?
Yeah, great question. So we actually cover four Southern Nevada counties. We cover Clark, obviously, as our biggest, along with Esmeralda, Nye, and Lincoln counties. And I would definitely be remiss if I didn't also recognize that we do have another affiliate food bank in the state of Nevada, a counterpart of ours called the Food Bank of Northern Nevada, and they actually cover the other 13 counties in the state.
So, my takeaway from that is, even though you're not called, quote, a food bank, that's what you are.
We are a food bank. It's not technically in our name, Three Square Food Bank. We go by Three Square for Three Square meals, but you are correct that there are two major food banks here in the state of Nevada, Three Square and the Food Bank of Northern Nevada, and we are the largest hunger service organization in the state.
Right, right. So, Gabby, how does advocacy fit into that mission of Three Square?
Yeah, it's really multifaceted, to be honest. I mean, there's a big piece that is there are quite a few government programs that we operate as food banks. And so that advocacy comes in the form of more of that government relations, government affairs piece, and making sure that there are those quality feedback loops with those state agencies and federal agencies that help govern those programs, like the Department of Agriculture, like the Department of Health and Human Services, and under it, the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. And making sure that the relationships there are established and strong and that we're able to communicate back and forth. But there's also the piece and really where we're charting into more and more going forward of really better understanding the agency partners, for which there are more than 150 of them that we work with across the four counties we serve, who are fellow nonprofits who help in this service, as well as the neighbors that we serve day in and day out, and understanding their needs and why it is that they're experiencing food insecurity, and really raising those issues with legislators and being a part of coalitions and conversations around that type of policy making.
So, it sounds like your advocacy's efforts would not be limited to the legislature, but to counties, cities, federal government.
Correct. That would totally be correct. I mean, I think the reality is, I think we don't ever want to leave anything on the table. And so we're always trying to strengthen those relationships with, to your point, our municipalities. Definitely a big piece, as you and I both know, is the state legislature. And it's so unique here in Nevada and only meeting every other year for 120 days. And so we do a lot of work around that. But we do also definitely engage at the federal level with our federal delegation. And again, with those federal agencies too, like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, about the programming that affects us. And I'm sure people may know of some of those big bills, especially at the federal level, that we talk about that really impact the beneficiaries that we work with and the programs that we help operate. But things like the Farm Bill are immensely important to us. And so staying in the conversation about how that comes together, what it looks like, and making sure it really benefits all Nevadans is critical for us.
So, in terms of how you balance your workload, what are your responsibilities besides advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the meat and potatoes of it. And I am very lucky here at the food bank to have another staff member on my team as well. The food bank hired a community organizer a year or two back and really made a commitment to that root cause work I was referencing to really figure out how we could better be building relationships with these partners and the neighbors we serve, as well as the community, like coalitions and entities like the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition. To really kind of be in community in this work. And so this really is kind of the bread and butter of what we do. We're always trying to build relationships with those folks, to have our ear to the ground, to understand what are the needs. Um, and trying to kind of bring folks to the table where those decisions are being made to be a part of that conversation.
So when it comes to policy change issues that arise, would you say Three Square is more reactionary, or do you do things in the affirmative sense in terms of seizing an opportunity and going forward with whatever that policy change might be?
Yeah. I think it's probably a little bit of both, I would say. I think there's definitely the piece when you say reactionary that is us trying to keep our ear to the ground of what the neighbors we're serving and the community allies we're working with are hearing and experiencing, and raising those concerns or seeking out those kind of policy opportunities to try and help plug. But there is definitely some of that more proactive work that we do. I think there are a couple of those such examples that we're looking at even for the 2025 legislative session. In 2021, the state committed to standing up a brand new program here in the state called Home Feeds Nevada, which is a local food purchase assistance program. And it was originally seed funded with a little bit of COVID era American Rescue Plan Act funding, but that money is set to run out by about mid-year next year. And so that has been something that, knowing that we can see that deadline impending rather than waiting for it to actually drop off, and kind of creating this cliff, both for the agricultural producers who really love this program, but also for the neighbors who have really benefited from high quality, locally grown produce here in our state. We've really tried to be more proactive in having those ongoing conversations with Director Goycochea at the Department of Agriculture and his team, and with legislators about how impactful this program has been, how important it is, and really trying to find a funding stream for it before we even get to the point of it being entirely gone. So I think we do kind of play in both spaces of we don't always know what we don't know, and so there will be some of that reactionary, right? But we do try and be proactive. So that we can kind of be at the forefront of this and sharing kind of what our experiences and knowledge is on this with legislators, so that we can kind of make that change as well.
You mentioned the Food Bank of Northern Nevada. So when it comes to legislation, are you working with partners such as the Food Bank of Northern Nevada, coordinating, uh, making uh, collective efforts, if you will, to push legislation?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say the Food Bank of Northern Nevada is probably one of our strongest partners here in the state, just because while no two food banks in the country are the same, we are probably most familiar with one another's struggles, experiences here in the state, and what we do in the day to day than anybody else. But I would say that we work with tons of folks, and that's really been one of my kind of greatest aspirations since I joined the food bank in the last 2 years, is that coalition building piece. There are so many folks, both those that make total sense, whether you're thinking about school nutrition staff, school districts, some of the partners in our network that we work with. There are, very large organizations that come to mind, like a Catholic Charities or a Lutheran Social Services, but also small churches that we work with. Just down the street for most of our homes, that we consider in kind of these coalitions and partnerships. But we also try and look for some of those more non-traditional partners as well, who also just care about children's development, that care about the whole family, that care about senior hunger. And some of those are other folks who are a part of the Minority Health Coalition, like Children's Advocacy Alliance has been a phenomenal partner of ours, but we really try and look far and wide. And that's, I think, something that we've really learned along the way from so many of our affiliates across the country in the food banking space, is thinking about who's not at the table, but also who hasn't traditionally been at these tables, but who makes sense. And sometimes that's really thinking about our rural communities who often get left out. Sometimes that's thinking, you know, maybe labor doesn't, it hasn't traditionally been in this conversation, but could they be? They may have a lot of families. And so really trying to think outside the box. Chambers come to mind. I mean, we're really trying to think big tent. How do we bring everybody in on these issues? And also make sure along the way that we're really well versed in a host of different issues impacting our state as well, even if it's not so strictly food.
How do you bring messages that you just shared that evolve over time to a legislator? How best to suit your goal with meeting with legislators?
Yeah. I mean, we do it a variety of ways. I think one of the biggest in the interim has just been opening our doors and saying, hey, we would love to host you. We would love to host you either at one of our campuses. We would love to host you at a distribution with one of our partners. So come out and let us show you what we're actually about, and chat with neighbors about what their individualized experiences are. Some of that has been really prioritizing those interim committees that are such a great opportunity. We've had the chance this year to go before Health and Human Services and other committees just to talk about, one, what we view some of our priorities in 2025 being, but also talking about just what are the food banks facing, what does food insecurity look like in our community today, and being given that opportunity or requesting that opportunity to be able to share kind of that quick snapshot in time has been hugely helpful. And we've seen some really great actions out of that, whether that's BDRs being introduced by legislators because of things we brought up, or letters being sent to agency heads about funding needs for the coming biennium. So that's definitely a big way. I think another way that we often think about, and I think my mind on this comes from a place of having worked for a member of our federal delegation previously and having been on the other side of the table of folks coming to you and talking about their issues and making asks, is how do we make things immensely accessible? You and I both know that legislators are very busy, and especially having a citizen legislature like we do, they are folks, excuse me, who are working full-time jobs, who have a breadth of knowledge on a ton of different things, but food insecurity may not be their thing. They may not be, an absolute expert in food banking. And so we've really tried to dial in the last couple of years, what do one pagers look like? What do leave behinds look like? What do we put on those? How do we, I don't think we want to drown folks with statistics. So we try and be mindful about what are kind of the attention grabbing or most impactful stats. How do we kind of paint this picture? How do we share those neighbor voices in these? And so we're really trying to get better and better about those, as well as how do we bring information that is specific to the legislator and their specific district, because we know that's often an ask as well. Like, legislators care about the state of Nevada, they care about southern or northern Nevada, but they also often want to know, what about my district? What about Assembly District 5? What about Senate District 20? And so we've tried to get better too about how we're looking at our data internally and how we're building those types of materials to help paint that picture about what food insecurity in their specific district looks like, and how they can help us along the way in ensuring that no Nevadan goes hungry.
So preview of 2025. Any suggestions of where you might be headed from a legislative standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's three big things we're definitely keeping our eye on. We definitely just, in a root sense, care about kids being fed. We have pretty robust child nutrition programming here at the food bank. And so we're definitely keeping our eye on universal school meals. We're hopeful to see that get across the finish line this legislative session, so that we can see that be restored statewide for all Nevada kids. We're also really focused on a new program that actually launched here in 2024 and across the country, called Summer EBT. It's a little bit like the pandemic EBT program that ran through the pandemic. It is launching as we speak here in September 2024, but it is going to need long-term funding. And so we're just keeping an eye on how that's going to ultimately play out. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, we're definitely focused on Home Feeds Nevada as one of the beneficiaries of that product that comes through that program out into the hands of hungry neighbors, we're definitely interested in seeing that be fully funded in perpetuity, so that they can continue to do their best work. And then otherwise, I think just continuing to keep an eye on legislation that taps into that root cause work we were talking about. So we're always going to be assessing legislation that comes up from the lens of how is this impacting the neighbors we serve? Are these stressors that are those kind of difficult trade-offs they're having to make day in and day out between food on the table, a roof over their head, gas in the car, making it to work, all of those pieces. And so just kind of assessing pieces of legislation from that lens, and lending our voice where we can to those choruses.
Well, Gabby, thank you so much. Gabby Everett from Free Square. There are 5 videos in this series. We encourage you to hear the perspectives of other public policy workgroup members on another advocacy and policy change. Thank you.